who writes in the Sunday Times this morning that the ban on socialising in groups of more than 6 is unenforceable except in a Stasi-style surveillance state with a poisonous network of informers. Very good to have you on the programme, Lord Sumption. Thank you for coming in. Why unenforceable?
You can enforce it if you're sufficiently intrusive. You can put spies on every street. You can have marshals watching through windows. You can do all the disagreeable things which I pointed out in my article. But unless you do that, people are not going to respect it unless they think it's a good idea. Many people do, but there's a very large number who don't.
Why is it not a good idea to try and regain control of a virus that is spreading out of control?
It's an excellent idea to get control of the virus if it was possible. But the fact is, it's not possible. We have tried the most aggressive form of social distancing possible, a complete lockdown. Other European countries have done it even more fiercely than we have. Does it work? No, it does not. That's why we're in the current position. The problem about a lockdown was pointed out to the government by SAGE on 2 occasions before it was imposed, once on the 25th of February and once on the 16th of March. What they said on both of those occasions was that a lockdown does not reduce deaths. It only spreads them over a long period. So you have 3 choices. You can have no lockdown, you can have a permanent lockdown until somebody devises a safe and effective vaccine. We have no idea when that will be. And the third choice is you can have a strictly temporary lockdown for long enough to enable the NHS intensive care capacity to catch up. Initially, the government adopted that third approach. But then, when it had successfully boosted the capacity of the NHS and succeeded in that policy, it lost its way. This happened at the beginning of May, when they continued the lockdown after its only sensible objective had been achieved. The problem with the government's present policy is that it is not possible for governments to get control of a virus that has become endemic without taking steps which are so brutal and intrusive as to destroy our society, our economy, our children's education, and everything that makes it worthwhile to be alive.
Is your argument then that the lockdown was ineffective in stopping the spread of the virus, but was effective in allowing the government to build up capacity to deal with the consequences of the virus that was running amok, particularly in those more elderly and more vulnerable?
I think that it was effective in allowing the NHS's ICU capacity to catch up. The peak of hospitalizations was achieved on the 11th of April. By the end of April, the government had brought on stream large amounts of additional capacity through the Nightingale hospitals and the requisitioning of private health capacity. And the fact is we have never come anywhere close.
So are you, sorry to interrupt, but are you then saying, well, if it's not lockdown as we've previously experienced it, and if it's not this sort of Stasi state that you're referring to in this piece, what is it that is relied upon to try and manage, control, in whatever way, whether it's ICU capacity or just the spread of it? What else is it that can be relied upon to help control this?
I don't believe that there is any effective way of eliminating an endemic virus.
No, I agree. You can't. Once it's here, it's here, and that was the SAGE notes make that clear. But
short of a vaccine,
but there is no country that has just returned completely to where we were before this. Even Sweden, where there famously is no lockdown, has brought in social distancing measures.
It has brought in much more moderate social distancing measures than we have. I mean, what the most striking lesson of all this is that there are many things that affect the progress of the virus. I suspect that the most important is the underlying state of health of the population, which varies from one European country to another. One thing that doesn't seem to make a difference is government action. So you have the minimum of government action in Sweden, the maximum of government action in Spain, and what is the result? Spain is currently much worse off than Sweden.
But in a way, Lord Sumption, you're talking more as an epidemiologist than as a lawyer here. You're speaking about matters that pertain to...
I'm not talking as a lawyer. I am not talking as a lawyer, but I'm not talking as an epidemiologist either. I'm talking as a reasonably well-informed citizen. Remember that the ministers who make these decisions, they're not epidemiologists either. What they do is that they look at the epidemiological evidence that is submitted to them. Most of that evidence is in the public domain. We can all look at it for ourselves, and informed citizens not only have the right, but also, I would suggest, the moral duty to have a view of their own on these matters.
So you would welcome the personal choice, people's own common sense, that dictates to them what actions they perform. You've spoken previously about if there were a pub open that you could walk into, however busy it would be, you would like to make that decision for yourself.
And I've done so since the pubs were opened. Yes, I mean, the fact is that leaving it to individual decision is a lot more efficient. We all have completely different degrees of vulnerability.
Yes.
We are surrounded by people who have different degrees of vulnerability. We can make decisions which are appropriate for ourselves and for those around us, whereas the government's lawmaking is a blunderbuss. It's a one-size-fits-all approach, which involves forbidding large numbers of things that are completely harmless, as well as many things that are potentially harmful.
Do you think it's well, you clearly do. It's too much of an erosion of freedom that this country has hard fought for in the past?
That is a distinct point, and I do believe that, yes. It seems to me that there are some... let's assume for a moment that this policy was effective, contrary to all the evidence. After all, why are we in a position where infections are increasing if the policies adopted in the last 6 months worked? Mm-hmm. But even if there was some evidence that these stratagems worked, to my mind, there is a price which it is not worth paying to reduce the level of deaths. Safety first is fine up to a point, but you do have to ask yourself, what are you putting second, third and fourth? And if what you're putting second, third and fourth is the whole of our national life and our economy and our civilization as social human beings, that is not a price worth paying.
I would love to have you back on the programme to talk at length about this, because I could go on, but I want to come on to another law change that is happening in the short order, which is to Brexit and the changes that are coming through the bill that is being presented. Do you think that this change that undermines international law brings shame on this country, as Sir John Major and Tony Blair think?
Well, of course it does. To renege on an international agreement, which you made just 9 months ago, is a very extraordinary thing to do. Personally, I think that Boris Johnson's Northern Ireland Protocol agreement, agreed in October and formally made in January, was not a very sensible agreement to make. He's absolutely right to say that it severs two parts of the United Kingdom by introducing an Irish customs barrier across the Irish Sea. But that's what he agreed to last year. It was a serious mistake, but that's no reason for doubling down on that mistake by having made that agreement, then trying to repudiate it.
There is the ministerial code, which all ministers are bound to... are bound to, and in doing so follow the rule of law. Is your assessment that this breach of international law, as Brandon Lewis, the government minister, put it last week, is your assessment that breaks the ministerial code, and if so, what consequences could follow?
It does break the ministerial code, because the ministerial code sets out a number of conventions. They are internal United Kingdom conventions, but one of those conventions is that the United Kingdom respects and observes international law. We have for many years observed international law ourselves. We have used it to our own advantage in criticising the acts of others, and it seems to me that it has over the years brought us a great deal more benefit than harm. At any rate, it's a tradition that dates back 150 years or more, and we should adhere to it.
And any argument from the government that says we need to do this because we need to protect ourselves from the most extreme interpretation of the Withdrawal Act that the EU might perform, your response to that is presumably you shouldn't have signed it.
Exactly. I mean, they shouldn't have signed it, but they did.
And just very finally, I note on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph, we were talking about the fact that the law is everywhere right now. Front page of the Sunday Telegraph, Johnson set to opt out of human rights laws. Plans under discussion include opt-outs of the Human Rights Act, which could prevent many migrants and asylum seekers from using the legislation to avoid deportation and protect British soldiers against claims relating to overseas operations. Would you welcome that?
I would need to look at the fine print of the detail, but I do think that the Human Rights Convention has been a very unfortunate influence on English law.
In what way?
It has basically undermined democratic accountability by making many issues which are essentially political in nature and on which people disagree into judicial issues, and that has the effect of withdrawing it from the arena of public and parliamentary debate. In a democracy, that seems to me to be a very unsatisfactory thing to do.
Very grateful to you for your time this morning. Lord Jonathan Sumption, former Supreme Court Justice, many thanks for being here on Swarbrick on Sunday this morning. Keen to get your thoughts.